It's Friday, February 18. This is the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. Prime Minister Andrew Holness believes the tourism industry has a critical role to play in the economic recovery of Jamaica and other tourism-dependent Caribbean countries. However, on the heels of a crippling COVID-19 pandemic, as well in the face of concerns posed by climate change, Mr. Holness is stressing the need for greater global collaboration to identify best practices, strategies, and innovations. The Prime Minister was delivering a virtual address at the start of the Global Tourism Resilience Forum in Dubai on Thursday.
Although the scale and impact of COVID-19 was unprecedented, there will no doubt be other significant challenges that the industry will face, including those posed by climate change. This necessitates a posture that understands the various threats to the industry and the need for a proactive approach to enhancing readiness and capacity to meet the challenges of the present and the future.
The Prime Minister also cited several important lessons emerging from the pandemic. Among them, he said, was the need for more active commitment to behavioral changes among stakeholders to reduce environmental, social, and human health risks. He also warned that tourists will opt for sustainable destinations in the post-COVID era, adding that destinations which fail to reorient themselves towards meeting the demands are likely to be left behind.
The increased demand for a more sustainable brand of tourism presents an opportunity to prioritize the responsible use of natural resources, the preservation of the cultural assets of the host countries, and the strengthening of local involvement and participation in the tourism value chain. Decades of experience with cyclical crises and the current prolonged crisis have generated accumulated wisdom about the needs and challenges of the industry.
The impact of the global coronavirus pandemic on the tourism sector topped the agenda during Thursday's Global Tourism Forum. A concern was raised by Aradhana Koala, founder and CEO of Aptamines, a UK-based global tourism advisory firm. She pointed out that while the international travel and tourism trade has been hardest hit, the pandemic also laid bare the realities of the gender inequity.
We were already poorer than the men before the pandemic, owing to a lot of systemic inequalities. I'm talking pay, employment, work-life balance, and safety at work and at home. And now, 2 years into the pandemic, the gap has widened, and the deep-rooted inequalities in the society has been exposed.
Ms. Koala, who was addressing the topic Women in Tourism, also said that the COVID-19 crisis has forced many women to drop out of the labor force in the last 2 years, forcing societies to regress to the 1950s. She added that while women make up more than 50% of the workforce in the tourism, the top tier of the sector is still dominated by men. Persons who have missed the date for their second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine are being urged to complete the series. Director of Family Health Services in the Ministry of Health, Dr. Melody Ennis, says about 40,000 people in Jamaica have missed their date. She says some 648,081 people, or just under 24% of the Jamaican population, is fully vaccinated. She told the press that 1.3 million people have received a dose of the vaccine, and of that number, they have maybe 45,000 persons who missed their second dose. So those persons are being encouraged to come in and complete the series. Construction of the new Westmoreland Police Divisional Headquarters is slated to commence in the coming financial year. A sum of $700 million has been allocated in the 2022-2023 estimates of expenditure now before the House of Representatives. For the upcoming fiscal year, it's anticipated that 50% of construction activities will be completed. The project, which is being implemented by the Ministry of National Security, is being financed from the Consolidated Fund. It is projected for completion in March 2024. Construction of the new divisional headquarters in Westmoreland form parts of the government efforts to provide improved facilities for the police. The curfew that has been in effect in sections of a Trenchtown community in Kingston Western Division since February 15 has been extended to 6 p.m. Saturday, February 19. The boundaries of the curfew remain as follows. North along 11th Street from the intersection of Greenwich Street and 11th Street using an imaginary line to the intersection of Pole Vault Pathway and Collie Smith Drive. East along Collie Smith Drive from the intersection of Pole Vault Pathway to Collie Smith Drive to the intersection of Collie Smith Drive and 7th Street. South along 7th Street from the intersection of Collie Smith Drive and 7th Street to the intersection of 7th Street and Greenwich Street. West along Greenwich Street from the intersection of Greenwich Street and 7th Street to the intersection of 11th Street and Greenwich Street. During the hours of the curfew, all persons within the boundaries of the curfew are required to remain within their premises unless otherwise authorized in writing by the ground commander. Jamaica's border defense will be strengthened in the new financial year. This as the government has allocated $2.7 billion in the 2022-2023 estimates of expenditure to facilitate the JDF's procurement of radar, marine, offshore patrol vessels, cameras, software, hardware, and other equipment. This will be done under the purchase and overhaul of ships coastal surveillance project. The estimates were tabled in the House of Representatives on February 10 by Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clark. They will be considered by the Standing Finance Committee of the House beginning March 1. Chairman of the Crime Monitoring Oversight Committee, CMOC, Lloyd Distant, is calling on every Jamaican to join the fight against crime. He was speaking at a recently held JIS think tank to outline CMOC's plans for monitoring the reduction of crime and violence.
I was in a community yesterday, and the JCF's Community Security and Safety Branch turned up. It was a pretty large community gathering. They had been looking to establish a youth club. And there are probably about 200 youths around, and it provided a great opportunity for them to interact with the JCF at that time. Those are the kinds of things, the youth gathering together instead of getting involved in criminality, doing things which are constructive and building an engagement amongst each other.
Mr. Distant says under the social, community and cultural transformation pillar of CMOC, the entity wants to see a sustained change in the fabric of society. He also made it clear that we all have a role in accountability.
If we don't hold each other accountable, if we don't hold government, the ministries, departments, the agencies, ourselves as Jamaican accountable for the results, for delivering on our responsibilities, we'd still continue to have challenges in that regards as well.
Executive Director of CMOC, Lieutenant Colonel Oral Khan, adds that the committee also wants to see the removal of profit from crime.
We are doing some investments in the police which will make it more difficult for criminals, the activities of criminals to escape detection. We are hoping that the citizenry will see what is happening and will come on board with information to speed up the pace at which persons who offend can be detected, caught, and brought before the courts.
Jamaica is being hailed as one of the top countries to responsibly distribute COVID funds. The US dollar is being sold for an average $156.77. We get the details in this business report.
The Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, has hailed Jamaica as one of 28 countries to exercise commendable fiscal responsibility in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Following the release of its report, Following the Money, Transparency and Oversight in the Disbursement of Pandemic Funds, CAPRI highlighted the government's $25 billion stimulus package, the largest in the country's history, to individuals and businesses to cushion the economic impact of the pandemic. This was done under the guidance of the Auditor General's Department upon the request of Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark. On Wednesday, Dr. Clark sat with Capri's executive director for the report's release, and speaking on the importance of implementing sound policies and robust institutions, sought to give his reason for the action.
Public trust is low, and we don't have those sort of systems on the back end. So, as a person who was responsible, I just felt the need to reach out to the Auditor General, and I had, good people who provided me with advice as well, to seek her agreement on whether or not she could do a concurrent audit. So I wrote to her, and in that letter that I wrote to her, I set out and I said, look, the scale of this intervention that's going to be required is on a level that we have never done before. The government of Jamaica has never distributed this volume of funds before. And we've never had to do it in such a short space of time on a system that does not exist. And so I laid that out in a letter and asked the Auditor General's department or office whether they would be willing and available to conduct concurrent audits on the application system, because the application was just developed in a matter of weeks, and on the disbursement.
Although it was quick thinking by the minister to seek and implement ways to navigate the pandemic, Executive Director at Capri, Damian King, highlighted the fact that there was still work to be done as there were deficiencies.
In a matter of days, actually, to build the system that was going to deliver this cash and identify the recipients by the application process you set up. It really exposed, sadly, that we lack an effective social safety net system in Jamaica. That the identification of the recipients of need, even though the stimulus, the trigger, was unprecedented, if we had a responsive and dynamic and robust safety net system, then you would not have had to, build the plane while flying it. So doesn't this speak to the fact that once we get out of the emergency situation and the pandemic panic, that a priority of this government shouldn't be to look at Jamaica's social safety net and how to make it stronger and better?
Dr. Clark says reformation of the Jamaica's social safety net to increase accessibility and benefits are an important priority for the administration. He also suggested that the country continues to build its digital footprint in an effort to engage and reach more of its citizens. For the Business Report on PBCJ, I'm Denida Rodney.
In foreign exchange trading for Thursday, February 17, the US dollar sold for an average $156.77. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $123.47. The pound sterling traded for $212.10, and the euro sold for an average $182.06. In Thursday's trading session, the following reflect the movement of the JSE indices. The JSE index declined by 5,907 points to close at under 400,000 units. The junior market index declined by 74 points to close at over 3,000 units. The combined market index declined by 6,193 points to close at over 400,000 units, and the All Jamaican Composite Index declined by 4,913 points to close at over 400,000 units. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 106 stocks, of which 33 advanced, 58 declined, and 15 traded firm. Stocks advanced for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited, and Blue Power Group Limited. Stocks declined for 1834 Investments Limited, Access Financial Services Limited, and Barita Investments Limited. Trading firm were 138 Student Living Jamaica Variable Preference, CAC 2000 9.5% Preference Shares, and Carreras Limited. Tropical Battery Company Limited was the volume leader with over 13.2 million units, followed by Spur Tree Spices Jamaica Limited with over 7.2 million units, and Sagicor Select Funds Limited Financial with over 7 million units. In market data for oil prices extended losses on Friday and were heading for a weekly fall as the prospect of increased Iranian oil exports eclipsed fears of potential supply disruption resulting from the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Brent crude futures fell $2.44 or 2.6% to $90.53 a barrel, extending a 1.9% drop from the previous session. West Texas Intermediate crude futures shed $2.39 or 2.6% to $89.37 a barrel after sliding 2% on Thursday. Fears over possible supply disruptions resulting from the Russian military presence at Ukraine's borders have capped losses this week. The Bank of Jamaica's central bank digital currency CBDC has a new name. In a release issued Thursday, the central bank noted that with its image design competition closed, the digital currency is now called Jamaica Digital Exchange JAMDEX with the tagline "No cash, no problem." The winning logo features what it calls a distinctive outline of Jamaica's national fruit and national dish key ingredient, the ackee. Ashley Payne won both prizes in the name and tagline competition, receiving 600,000 Jamaican dollars, 350,000 for the name and 250,000 for the tagline in regular currency, plus a combined total of $50,000 in CBDC. Gerard Harvey received $350,000 in regular currency and $25,000 in CBDC for conceptualizing and designing the logo. Both winners collected their prizes in a small ceremony at BOJ in August 2021. The central bank says no winners were found for the representative image category, so that design was completed in-house by its graphic arts unit. And with that, we call an end to the Friday edition of the Business Report inside the news on PBCJ. I'm Gabrielle Thompson. Pleasant viewing.
In regional news, we look to Trinidad and Tobago. Any form of sabotage has been ruled out of Wednesday's major blackout. Public Utilities Minister Marvin Gonzalez says this was indicated in a report from T&Tech, which was submitted to the Prime Minister. Sunil Lala reports.
It is quite clear that there was no sabotage.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has received a preliminary report from T&Tech on Wednesday's major outage, which ruled out any form of human sabotage. And following an emergency National Security Council meeting on Thursday morning, Minister Stuart Young says a team of independent experts will now analyze and provide recommendations following the major disruption.
So we're looking forward to that. Of course, the timeline has not yet been decided, but we do know it has to happen as urgently as possible. We need to identify the persons, which will be done shortly.
T&Tech's General Manager Kelvin Ramsuk admitted that there were significant issues to restore power.
All the capacity in this country, in terms of generation capacity, is on the lower half of this country, right, from central to south. And therefore, you now have to deal with bringing that capacity up on the grid. And to do that, you have to be careful in terms of your voltages.
Meanwhile, Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines praised the police service for their commitment.
Public wouldn't know, but it provides an opportunity for terrorists. It provides an opportunity for extreme social disorder. And we were able to avoid and avert some of that last evening, and we are more than grateful.
And the Police Commissioner MacDonald Jacobs said aside from two incidents, a shooting at a PTSC compound and a robbery at a service station along the Beetham Highway, no other incidents were reported.
Yes, there were other situations that occurred in other divisions, but there was no correlation to the blackout.
Minister Young also dispelled claims that there were any issues with the supply of gas, unlike an event which occurred in 2013. Sonolala, TTT News.
Trinidad Generation Unlimited has confirmed that it experienced a total loss of facility power generation at 12:52 p.m. on Wednesday due to a fault at the T&Tech Gandhi Village substation. In a statement on Thursday, the company said this caused all generating machines at TGU to trip, leading to a loss of its power supply to T&Tech. It added that it was subsequently informed that all other independent power producers also lost total facility generation. CGU said, in consultation with TNTech, it immediately initiated its process to restart its generators to allow for a gradual restoration of power supply to the national grid. The company said it remains committed to providing a reliable supply of power to the nation and will work together to achieve this goal.
In more news, Public Utilities Minister Marvin Gonzalez said while most of WASA's water treatment plants and production wells were up and running, there was an issue with one of the desalination plants. He noted that while things did not normalize yet, water production would be ramped up.
One of the desal plants did not come into operation, that is at 7 Seas in Point Fortin. The desalcot plant at Point Lisas, they were producing water this morning to the tune of about 5 million gallons of water per day. So things did not normalize as we expected at the desal plants, but I am hoping that by the end of today, the desalcot will go back up and ramp up their production to 40 million gallons of water per day.
Mr. Gonzalez also responded to why mobile users, particularly from TSTT, were affected during the outage.
Some of the generators, or rather transmitters, can stay on stream for 4 hours because they are battery powered. Unfortunately, because of the extent of the outage, a lot of the transmitters went out of service, causing a disruption in the telecommunication services to a number of customers across Trinidad and Tobago.
In the Bahamas, the Prime Minister says officials are taking a closer look at the Auditor General's report on the tourism ministry. He says the report confirmed his suspicions about the travel health visa.
On the heels of an Auditor General's report which revealed government officials violated the law and ignored certain best practices, Prime Minister Philip Davis says an investigation has been launched into the findings.
The audit report was quite revealing, as you would have noted, and there are a number of findings that require further inquiries. And I'm advised by the relevant technocrats in our ministry that those inquiries will be engaged, and the relevant agencies that have charge of inquiries for those matters will be engaged to do it.
Davis's comments come one day after Minister of Tourism Chester Cooper told Our News he has accepted the answers from tourism officials regarding the report's findings. The audit revealed that in some instances contracts were not executed in accordance with financial regulations. It also stated that no competitive bidding was pursued and said services commenced initially with only a verbal agreement. Additionally, a contract was never officially signed with Canoe, which was responsible for executing monthly payments to all vendors. When asked if the investigation could result in police involvement, the Prime Minister said this.
That will not be a matter for me to decide. That will be a matter for the authorities to decide.
Now, back when the travel health visa was rolled out, the then Davis-led opposition took issue with the way it was done. Today, Davis said that audit revealed that his suspicions were correct.
My hunch was right. My concerns have been manifested by the findings of this report. We were concerned about the efficacy and propriety of the arrangement and how it was set up, and the report has now revealed what we feared. And the other thing is we now have to do is follow the money.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
In news from St. Lucia, External Affairs Minister Alva Baptiste wants to make the department more accountable in delivering tangible results towards the island's domestic socio-economic agenda. Akeem Duplessis reports.
St. Lucia's Minister for External Affairs has declared that the St. Lucia Labour Party administration's foreign policy will be driven by the country's domestic development needs and must therefore focus on mutually beneficial relationships and results, not photo ops and empty associations. Minister Baptiste made the remarks in delivering the opening address at an orientation workshop for the newly appointed heads of the country's overseas mission held at Bay Gardens Inn on Friday, 11th February 2022. The External Affairs Minister sought to explain the basis for a fresh approach to St. Lucia's foreign policy.
In practical terms, this means that St. Lucia's development agenda and its accompanying priorities will be the centrifugal force that determines the manner in which we interact with international actors. I envision a transition away from the tendency to be reactive and an inclination towards much greater proactivity.
In his speech to the diplomats, Baptiste also addressed the role of the Foreign Ministry in the new dispensation.
The reality is that in the current fiscal climate, the Ministry of External Affairs must serve a critical role in mobilizing the hundreds of millions that we need in the aftermath of this COVID-19 pandemic to re-establish order in the nation's finances. And to serve well in our role as the preeminent procurer of financial assistance, we must undertake a serious and thorough reorientation of all existing embassies, consulates, and missions.
Baptiste emphasized the requirement for coordination of efforts of the Foreign Service and state agencies through a framework to access aid funding in driving the domestic development agenda of St. Lucia.
There is a need to align each and every embassy, consulate, and mission with specific development priorities. There is also a need to identify and appoint focal points in our line ministries, who through capital can furnish our embassies with proposals, guidance, and the necessary support to ensure that we capitalize on each and every opportunity that is within our reach. Then there is the need to put in place a coordinating mechanism which will cause our diplomatic missions, capital, and focal points in line ministries to be much more timely and efficient in accessing and implementing development assistance.
St. Lucia Labour Party, in its 2021 election campaign manifesto, pledged to continue building an existing relationship with foreign governments and organizations and seek to build new alliances. Joachim Duplessis, HTS News Force.
In sports, Craig Brathwaite's monumental career best double hundred took the headlines on Thursday, turning the tables on Jamaica Scorpions and putting Barbados Pride in a strong position to push for victory on the last day of their second round encounter. The West Indies Test captain unveiled a priceless 276, his 25th triple-figure score at the first-class level, as the host piled up 521 for 8, declared to take a 193-run first innings lead on the penultimate day of a riveting contest at Kensington Oval. At the close, his Test vice-captain, Jermaine Blackwood, was looking ominous on an unbeaten 24 from 31 balls, helping Scorpions to 56 for 1, still requiring 137 runs to avoid an innings loss. Resuming the morning on 137 not out with his side on 243 for 2 in response to Scorpions' 328, Brathwaite produced an innings of the highest quality to reach his landmark of 318 balls in just under 8 hours with his 16th 4, a backfoot punch to the extra cover boundary of fast bowler Nicholson Gordon. And that's the news on PBCJ. Thanks so much for watching.